So the data that were collected during the 6 trials that we ended up using were compiled into a data table as shown. The first column represents the trial number purely for reference. The second column represents the illumination at the site of photosynthesis in lux as measured by a vernier light sensor. And the third column is the ET50 in minutes, which is the time that it took for half of the spinach discs to go from sinking to floating. Of note, on trial 6, the time says 4 with bubbles. There were some bubbles in the top of the beaker, and it's unclear whether or not this had an effect on the rate of photosynthesis, but either way, it's definitely worth noting. So on the x-axis of this graph is the illumination in lux at the site of photosynthesis, while the y-axis is the ET50 in minutes, so again, that's the time that it took for half of the spinach discs to float. And the data were fitted with an inverse trend line as was described in the hypothesis, and it roughly models the data in that it goes from a high number to a low number. It's somewhat curved. However, if you look at the points, there are very substantial individual deviations, and the points don't necessarily increase and decrease according to the trend line. So it's unclear whether or not an inverse relationship is the best model for the data. Using a statistical technique known as linearization, the log base 10 of both the x and y values for each point were taken, and the new modified points were compiled into a new graph. According to statistics, if this new graph follows a fairly linear pattern, then an inverse relationship should be a good fit for the original graph. So as you can see, this process was done and a line was produced with an r-squared of 0.7774, so about 0.78. This is somewhat close to 1. It's still not as high as it would ideally be, so it's unclear how good of a fit this actually is. And as you can see, there are significant deviations from individual points from this line as well. So further experimentation is really necessary to determine whether the relationship between illumination and ET50 is truly an inverse relationship.